What makes a hip hop artist a legend? Is it record sales? Is it a number of hit records? Is it the feeling an artist brings to his or her fans? Is it a number of followers? Streams? Death? For nearly 3 decades, hip hop has been characterized by a number of high profile deaths from some of the culture's most beloved artists. The death of a beloved artist almost always invokes strong emotions from fans. In hip-hop, there is often a debate amongst fans about which falling artist deserves legendary status. Two artists who many feel have left lasting legacies beyond their success in the music industry are Tupac Shakur and Nipsey Hussle. Although their deaths are over 2 decades apart, observers of hip-hop culture have drawn compelling similarities between Nipsey Hussle and Tupac. They were both taken from us at the peak of their cultural power and significance. They were both very active in making significant reform in their communities. Both of their murders allegedly have strong ties to LA gang culture. Both murders have elicited a number of conspiracies among fans and casual onlookers alike. And finally, the aftermath of their murders saw fans elevate them from hip-hop artists to iconic figures beyond the culture. In this documentary, we explore the origins of both Tupac and Nipsey's impact. We analyze the rare and unique qualities that separated them from other artists while they were living, and what continues to make their impact felt in their absence. Tupac was born Lisanne Parrish Crooks on June 16, 1971, in Harlem, to Afeni Shakur and Billy Garland, who were members of the Black Panther Party in New York in the late 1960s and early 1970s. His mother Afeni would change his name to Tupac Amaru Shakur when he was a year old. The name derives from an 18th century Peruvian revolutionary leader named Tupac Amaru. While pregnant with Tupac, Afeni stood trial against the federal government as a part of the New York Panther 21 trial. She was indicted on 150 charges of conspiracy against the United States government and New York landmarks. 1 month before Tupac's birth, Afeni was acquitted of all charges as she served as her own legal counsel. It was under these tumultuous, stressful and extreme circumstances which served as Tupac's initial environment, an environment in which community and purpose were paramount. Tupac spent the earlier parts of his life growing up in Harlem, New York, but in 1984, his mother would move he and his sister to Baltimore, Maryland, where Tupac went on to attend high school at the Baltimore School for the Arts. One of his notable classmates would be future Hollywood actress and lifetime friend Jada Pinkett. While there, he would study the fine arts, including acting, poetry, jazz, and ballet. He would perform in several stage plays, including Shakespeare and The Nutcracker. But early on, Tupac had a passion for hip-hop. While in school, Tupac would win several rap competitions. At the Baltimore School for the Arts, Tupac's talent and charisma would win him many friends, as he was regarded as one of the most popular kids in his school. But his newfound sense of belonging wouldn't last long. In 1988, his family moved again, this time all the way across the country to Oakland, California. In Oakland, Tupac's social skills, wit, and charismatic charm blossomed and would become part of his signature, exuberant personality. Ever adaptable, Tupac settled in and began the process of making Oakland his home. The Golden State would prove to be the defining place for what was to come in Tupac's future. Nipsey Hussle was born Ermias Joseph Ascadam On August 15th, 1985, in Los Angeles, California, to Angelique Smith and Dawood Askadam. A young Ermias would find strength and purpose in his diverse ethnic background. This strength and purpose would be an essential tool in navigating the poverty-stricken, disenfranchised streets of the notorious Crenshaw area Ermias called home. From a young age, Ermias's creative capacity was evident as he started rapping at the tender age of 8. At the age of 11, he would start shining shoes, charging clients $2.50 per shine. But the gravitational pull of the gang culture that encompassed the streets of LA would soon set the young man on a different course. At the age of 14, Ermias became a flag-carrying member of the Rollin' 60s Crip set, but Ermias's affinity for something more was always evident. According to his brother Samuel, when Ermias was 12 years old, he built his own computer from scratch. This would be the same computer that he would use to begin to make his first music. As a teenager, his mother discovered a program at Watts Towers that would afford him studio sessions at no charge. Hussle spent 4 to 5 hours commuting from Crenshaw to Watts every day. He'd ride his bike to the bus stop that took him to the Metro Blue Line, and he'd walk the rest of the way. The Watts program and his cultural influences began shaping the young rapper before the world would be exposed to his musical prowess or his business acumen. While living in California, Tupac would begin to seriously embark upon his music career. In 1989, at the age of 17, Tupac would start taking poetry classes at a writing workshop in the Bay Area called the Microphone Sessions. The class was led by a 25-year-old woman named Layla Steinberg. Steinberg became heavily invested in Tupac's well-being. Recognizing the young MC's talents and charisma, Tupac would live with Steinberg for a period, as she would take on the role of manager for his budding rap career, along with his rap crew Strictly Dope. As his manager, Steinberg organized a local concert with Tupac and his group. Tupac's performance caught the attention of Atron Gregory, who was the manager for Dr. Dre's early rap group, the World-Class Wrecking Crew. Gregory took Tupac under his wing and tried to get him a record deal, but when a deal failed to materialize, Gregory would introduce Tupac to Shock G, the frontman of the popular rap group out of Oakland known as Digital Underground. Shock G informed Tupac that he didn't need any more rappers on his crew, but that he could use a backup dancer and a roadie to help carry equipment while the group was on the road. Tupac saw this as a great opportunity to get himself out there. As a member of the Digital Underground, he gained significant experience and recognition while honing his rap skills and persona. His breakthrough moment came when Tupac was given the opportunity to do a guest verse on Digital Underground's smash single, Same Song. The video for Same Song introduced Tupac's contagious energy infused with Afrocentric influences to a wider audience. He began shopping his demo tape to major labels and soon caught the interest of Interscope Records. In 2004, Nipsey spent 3 months with his father in East Africa, only to return to the dilapidated Slauson streets with a new outlook on music, business, and execution. Ermias would return from his trip to East Africa with a new focus and determination to expand his horizons. He was setting the stage to be the culture-shifting hip-hop artist he would eventually become. In 2005, Ermias would release his first mixtape under the moniker Nipsey Hussle. The title of the mixtape was Slauson Boy Volume 1, an ode to the infamous Cross Street in the Crenshaw neighborhood in Los Angeles. He would start his own record label of the same name. Nipsey went on to release a mixtape series in 2008 and 2009 titled Bullets Ain't Got No Name, Volume 1, 2, and 3. The tapes would bolster Nipsey's credibility as a burgeoning artist on the LA hip-hop scene. His hard work landed him a record deal with Epic Records. But years of the label not delivering, Nipsey would begin campaigning for his release from Epic. With the success of his mixtapes, Nipsey decided that he'd be better off hedging his bets on going independent instead of relying on a major label to reach his success. In 2010, Nipsey would grace the cover of XXL magazine's coveted freshman class, along with J. Cole, Big Sean, J-Rock, and Freddie Gibbs. Later that year, he released his mixtape titled The Marathon. The Marathon was the first release on his newly established independent record label named All Money In. After years of campaigning, Nipsey was eventually granted his release from Epic Records. Now he was in position to take his career entirely in his own hands. Nipsey would now take his hustle to another level and would take unprecedented steps to establish himself beyond the Los Angeles hip-hop scene. In 1991, Tupac's debut album, Tupacalypse Now, was released on Interscope Records. The album wasn't a huge commercial success, but was lauded for Tupac's propensity to touch on socially conscious issues. However, what was arguably his biggest breakthrough to mainstream prominence came from him landing the role of Bishop in the 1992 Def Jam-produced film, Juice. As Bishop, Tupac played a hyper-aggressive teenager who was determined to sow his street credibility by reaping havoc on his peers. The role gained Tupac critical acclaim and began to sow the seeds of his notorious thug persona. Tupac's authenticity and the role of the troubled, misguided urban youth propelled his position as a pop culture staple. In the same year of the release of Juice, Tupac would release his sophomore album Strictly for My Niggas, which spawned some of his most impactful singles, including Brenda's Got a Baby and I Get Around. The album was a commercial success and solidified Tupac as a burgeoning figure in hip-hop culture. His star continued to soar, as Tupac was becoming not only an important voice in hip-hop culture, but a sought-after actor in Hollywood as well. In 1993, he was cast alongside Janet Jackson in the John Singleton-directed film Poetic Justice. In his role as Lucky, Tupac would show a more vulnerable side, nearly the opposite of Bishop in Juice. Once again, Pac would be lauded for his strong acting prowess. As Lucky, Tupac navigated interpersonal relationships and matters of the heart, which allowed Hollywood to see and embrace his diverse acting range. It appeared almost inevitable that Tupac was headed for a meteoric rise in pop culture. After the success of The Marathon, Nipsey would follow up with the sequel, The Marathon Continues, in 2011. He told his fans that the next title in the mixtape series would be TM3, Victory Lap. He later decided that Victory Lap would instead be the title of his debut studio album. In the year 2013, in place of TM3, Nipsey dropped his 8th mixtape titled Crenshaw. He would make the mixtape available for free on digital platforms, but pressed up 1,000 hard copies of the album, which fans could purchase for the price of $100 per CD at his Marathon pop-up store on Fairfax in Los Angeles. He knew some fans would download the album for free online, but that others would be willing to buy the album at $100 to bring them closer to his brand. Nipsey's ambitious marketing strategy captivated fans and industry bigwigs alike. The 1,000 CDs would sell out within 24 hours at the pop-up shop, grossing an impressive $100,000. Jay-Z and his company, Roc Nation, were thoroughly impressed by Nipsey's bold move and would purchase 100 copies of the $100 CD, which bolstered the Crenshaw rapper's substantial press coverage for his endeavor. The publicity would catapult Nipsey into a new level of rap stardom. What's more impressive is that Nipsey achieved this financial and commercial success without the help of a major label, further solidifying his genius as not only a talented artist, but a business mastermind. The following year, he released a follow-up to Crenshaw titled Mailbox Money. Nipsey would employ the same $100 per CD tactic and was once again successful. In 2016, Nipsey dropped the single FDT, Fuck Donald Trump, featuring YG, which Nipsey wrote while following the 2016 presidential elections. He was inspired after becoming angry about then-candidate Trump's racist rhetoric towards Mexican Americans. The song reached number 50 on the Hot R&B Hip-Hop Songs chart and won Nipsey more critical acclaim from his hip-hop fans. As he would demonstrate in his subsequent work, Nipsey's affinity towards using his voice to uplift others went beyond just words. The young teen who was given an opportunity at Watts Tower Project had not forgotten about his humble beginnings. Nipsey would strategically incorporate his hometown in future business ventures. As his star continued to rise, Tupac's activist roots were apparent in his work on and off the stage. Tupac was highly influential in brokering a ceasefire agreement among rival members of the Bloods and Crips by having them sign an ethics code known as the Code of Thug Life. He helped to write the code along with Dr. Mikial Shakur and others, which outlined the do's and don'ts for those engaged in street life in order to curb the violence and work towards peace. In 1993, Tupac would form the rap group of the same name, Thug Life, in order to further his cause and promote the values of the movement. Pac was an outspoken critic on the social conditions experienced by African Americans. He was critical of black celebrities he felt were not using their platforms to significantly uplift their communities. Tupac was determined to not have that same narrative overshadow his own career, as he felt a responsibility to use his voice to speak truth to power. In 1993, he gave a speech at the Black Expo where he decried those critical of young black men telling their truths through what the mainstream media coined gangster rap.
Because these white folks see us as thugs. I don't care what y'all think. I don't care if you think you a lawyer, if you a man, if you an African American, if you whatever the fuck you think you are. We thugs and niggas to these motherfuckers. You know? And until we own some shit, I'ma call it like it is. How you gonna be a man and we starving? Go ahead. You know? And you can walk by 5 different houses, ain't a man in either one of them motherfuckers. How we gonna be a man? How we gonna be African Americans? We out here dying. We dying.
In his music, Tupac rapped about police brutality, political unrest in the black community, the fallout of the crack era, and being fed up with the oppressive practices sanctioned by the government against black people. During this time, there was strong resistance by the establishment for what was perceived as anti-police, violent, and sexist rhetoric. From politicians such as Vice President Quayle to black social activist C. Dolores Tucker, there was a large anti-rap movement that slammed artists like Tupac for their lyrical content. With his great success and cultural power would come great personal and legal pitfalls. Nipsey understood early that in order to prevent others from ending up in gangs as he had, it was important for him to use his platform to bring solutions and offer alternatives in his community. In his music, he would denounce violence and talk openly about the highs and lows of gang culture. But his work went well beyond his words. He would use his earnings from music to help fund school programs and improvements. He founded Vector 90 in his neighborhood of Crenshaw. Vector 90 is a co-working space for young people to network and learn. His dream was for young people to use the center to learn science, technology, and mathematics. Nipsey was determined to make sure that his goal to put an end to senseless violence in his community extended beyond just words and lyrics. In March of 2019, Nipsey reached out to the LAPD to set up a meeting that would be mediated by Roc Nation to explore what could be done to stop violence in South LA. The meeting was scheduled to convene on April 1st, 2019. As Tupac's career was taking off, he was building a reputation for himself of another sort, one that began to associate the young rapper with constant confrontation and controversies, particularly of legal consequences. In 1991, while walking in an intersection in downtown Oakland, California, Tupac was accosted by Oakland police for allegedly jaywalking. In Tupac's own words, he was being compliant when the officers asked him for his identification and began questioning him about his name. Then a confrontation broke out, and officers slammed Tupac on the ground and proceeded to beat him. Tupac would hire attorney John Burris and proceeded to sue the Oakland Police Department for $10 million for police brutality. The lawsuit would later be settled for a reported $42,000. In 1993, Tupac would be charged with shooting 2 off-duty cops in Atlanta, Georgia. Reportedly, the cops were in possession of stolen guns and fired at Tupac's car when he tried to drive off. Tupac would then pull out a gun and shoot the 2 officers, giving them non-life-threatening injuries. The charges against both parties would later be dropped after it was determined that Tupac was acting in self-defense. While he managed to avoid serious consequences, Tupac's legal troubles didn't stop there. In 1994, he was sentenced to 30 days in jail after getting into an altercation with filmmakers Albert and Allen Hughes, known collectively as the Hughes brothers. The Hughes brothers were working on a film Menace to Society and had promised Tupac a particular role in the picture, but later reneged, which caused the altercation. However, Tupac's most serious and consequential encounter came in 1993, when he was arrested and charged with sexual abuse in New York City. The charge came after a fan accused him of an inappropriate encounter. The case and trial would come in the midst of the recording of Tupac's third album, Me Against the World. Tupac would continue to record for himself and others as he awaited his fate. On the night of November 30th, 1994, the day before the verdict in his sexual abuse trial was to be announced, Shakur was robbed and shot 5 times by 3 men in the lobby of Quad Recording Studios in Manhattan. At the time of the robbery, Tupac's then friend and fellow MC, the Notorious B.I.G., and Big's producer Sean Puffy Combs were occupying one of the studios upstairs. Tupac would later accuse Biggie and Puffy for knowing about the attack beforehand and failing to inform him about it, an accusation that they would both deny. Shakur said that he believed the robbery was simply a setup for the attack, wondering why they would take jewelry and leave his Rolex watch. Tupac would check himself out of the hospital just 3 hours after surgery for his wounds. Shakur checked out of the Bellevue Hospital Center against doctors' orders. In the day that followed, he entered the courthouse in a wheelchair in the verdict hearing for his sexual abuse trial. He was found guilty on 3 counts of molestation and found not guilty on 6 other charges, including sodomy. A few months later, he would be sentenced to up to 4.5 years in prison. However, Tupac's legal battles would lead him to his most commercially successful years and ultimately to his untimely fate. On February 16, 2018, after many delays and setbacks, Nipsey released his official debut full-length album, aptly titled Victory Lap, in partnership with Atlantic Records. In 2018, as hip-hop continued to explore melodic R&B influenced verse delivery, Nipsey's Crenshaw flow continued to garner more attention. The album, which bolstered features from industry heavyweights like Diddy, YG, Kendrick Lamar, and more, would debut in the top 5 of Billboard 200 charts. The album won much acclaim from critics and would go on to be nominated for the Best Rap Album at the 2019 Grammy Awards, an honorable feat for an artist who had operated independently for most of his career. Now lauded for his musical evolution, his unique and groundbreaking marketing skills, his community activism, as well as his high-profile relationship with actress Lauren London. Nipsey had finally arrived and was ready to take his place among the top tier in hip-hop culture. While incarcerated, Interscope Records released Tupac's album, Me Against the World, on March 14, 1995. The record shot straight to the top of the charts, entering the Billboard 200 at number 1 and sold over 200,000 units in its first week. Tupac made history as the first recording artist to have a number 1 album while serving a sentence in prison. The album spawned the singles Dear Mama, So Many Tears, and Temptation, and was lauded by critics and fans alike as the embattled rapper's best work to date. Me Against the World went on to achieve double platinum status for moving over 2 million units. Tupac was now the hottest rapper in hip-hop. Tupac was able to appeal the court's decision and was allowed to be set free until the new trial would convene, but he had to post $1.4 million in bail, which he did not have. He lacked the support of his label, Interscope Records, to bail him out of prison, as the label heads did not want to be held responsible for Tupac's pending case. However, he found an interested party, and the Interscope backed Death Row Records and its CEO, Marion Suge Knight. Knight and Death Row had experienced widespread success throughout the beginning of the decade with acts such as Dr. Dre, Snoop Doggy Dogg, Lady of Rage, and the Dogg Pound. Suge was willing to not only sign Tupac to his imprint, but also post the bail to release Tupac from Clinton Correctional Facilities. On September 16, 1995, he signed a 3-year deal with Death Row, agreeing to release 3 studio albums for the label, including one comprised of material that had already been recorded. He was now a free man. On February 13, 1996, Tupac's first album since posting bail, titled All Eyes on Me, was released on Death Row Records. Led by the Dr. Dre produced single, California Love, and the Snoop Doggy Dogg assisted track, Two of America's Most Wanted, as well as a strong anticipation from fans and members of the hip-hop community. All Eyes on Me was both a commercial and critical success. The double album would quickly reach multi-platinum status and launch Tupac into the stratosphere of mega-stardom. Tupac was now the biggest rap artist in hip-hop. His passion for his people never wavered. However, he was charged up from feeling betrayed by his friends and his own community. After being accused of rape, which he strongly denied and was not convicted for, as well as being shot, Tupac embraced the gangster image, fanned by the label's boss, Marion Suge Knight. Now, Tupac would turn his focus to other rappers and entertainers he felt were his enemies. The primary focus in his target scope would be his former friend Notorious B.I.G., whom Tupac would continue to accuse of being aware of his robbery and shooting at Quad Studios in 1994. B.I.G. would continue to deny this accusation. With Tupac now representing California and Biggie representing Brooklyn, New York, the media would blow the rappers' feud out of proportion, dubbing it the East Coast versus West Coast rap war. In the months to come, Tupac would unleash his fury on Biggie, his manager Puffy, and his label through a series of diss records and media tirades. It looked as though the future was bright for Nipsey Hussle, and he was enjoying his success. On March 30th, Nipsey was spotted at the NCAA March Madness game, smiling and taking pictures with fans. But no one could have predicted the series of events that were soon to unfold the following day. On March 31st, 2019, Nipsey made a visit to his Marathon clothing store on Crenshaw, which he frequented often. While talking and taking pictures with fans outside, Nipsey was approached by a man named Eric Holder, who allegedly was known to Nipsey and his inner circle. Nipsey and Holder reportedly exchanged words before Holder left the scene. He would return a short while later, firing multiple shots that hit Nipsey and two other men next to him. Paramedics were called to the scene and rushed the Crenshaw rapper to the hospital. But their efforts were too late. At 3:55 p.m., Nipsey Hussle was pronounced dead at the age of 33 years old. Motivation for the shooting remains largely unknown, but investigators believe that the murder stemmed from a personal issue Holder had against Nipsey. On April 2nd, 2019, Holder was arrested by the Los Angeles Police Department and was charged with Nipsey's murder.
Yes, good evening, Chris. You can see still at this late hour, more than 6 hours, actually 7 hours, since this was first reported here. Hundreds of people continue to stream in, and now fans who want to
Nipsey's death was an enormous loss for the hip-hop community. His death has impacted and inspired many on the exact same streets where he was murdered. On April 12, 2019, Nipsey's funeral was held at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Thousands of fans and peers would gather in the arena to pay their final respects. Everyone from Snoop Dogg to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan would speak profoundly of the slain rapper from Crenshaw. President Barack Obama issued a public letter, which was read on stage by the love of Nipsey's life, Lauren London. Obama's letter said, "While most folks look at the Crenshaw neighborhood where he grew up and see only gangs, bullets, and despair, Nipsey saw potential. He saw hope. He saw a community that, even through its flaws, taught him to always keep going. His choice to invest in that community rather than ignore it, to build a skills training center and a co-working space in Crenshaw, to lift up the Eritrean American community, to set an example for young people to follow, is a legacy worth of celebration. I hope his memory inspires more good work in Crenshaw and communities like it." Following the funeral, hundreds would line up along the streets of Los Angeles to watch the procession carry their fallen hero through his neighborhood one last time. On September 7th, 1996, Tupac, Suge Knight, and members of the Death Row camp attended the Mike Tyson vs. Bruce Seldon fight at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Tyson would win the fight quickly, and he and Tupac would celebrate together backstage after the fight. While exiting the MGM, everyone was in great spirits, until a member of the Death Row entourage saw a rival gang member by the name of Orlando Anderson in the lobby. Anderson was allegedly a member of the notorious Compton gang known as the Southside Crips. He had allegedly been involved in a robbery of a Death Row associate earlier in the year in Los Angeles. When Orlando Anderson was pointed out to Tupac, he and the Death Row entourage commenced to go over to him and attack him. When the beating was over, Tupac and Suge would leave the MGM and head over to Club 662 in Vegas, which was owned by Suge and Death Row. They rode in Suge's 96 BMW sedan and were caravanning with other members of Death Row. While stopped at the light, a white Cadillac pulled up alongside the BMW and unloaded numerous rounds at Suge's car. Tupac was hit 4 times, including twice in his chest, and Suge was struck in the head by a bullet fragmentation. As the white Cadillac sped off, Suge was able to drive away from the scene, attempting to get to the hospital. While en route, their BMW hit a divider and blew out one of the tires on the vehicle. Police and paramedics arrived on the scene shortly thereafter and took Tupac to the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada. Tupac would undergo surgery to remove his right lung. He would remain in intensive care for 7 days, having been placed on life support. While the surgery to remove his right lung was successful, doctors could not stop the internal bleeding from the wounds he had sustained. On September 13th, 1996, Tupac's mother made the decision to take him off life support. He would be pronounced dead at 4:03 p.m. Tupac was 25 years old. His death would send shockwaves through the hip-hop community, among fans and peers alike. 2 months after his death, Tupac's final studio album, The Don Killuminati, The 7-Day Theory, would be released on Death Row Records. The album was a critical and commercial success, selling over 664,000 units in its first week of release, and went on to achieve multi-platinum status shortly thereafter. Tupac's estate would continue to release his previously recorded material in the years that followed, with fans heralding the slain rapper as one of the greatest artists of all time. Nipsey and Tupac were similar in that, in many ways, they were defining voices within the Black community. They spoke for those whose voices have been silenced or ignored. They gave hope and inspiration to their community, and were guiding lights for many without direction. They deconstructed the limitations of what many believed to be possible and challenged their audience to think independently. Both artists exemplified the hidden genius that is too often overlooked in the Black community, particularly among those who come from poverty. Tupac and Nipsey were both charismatic and beloved by both the streets and mainstream fans. They served as reminders that no matter how dark reality may be in the urban communities, a rose can blossom from the concrete. Hip-hop fans and commentators love to debate which artists deserve legendary status, particularly in the wake of an untimely death, which happens all too often in hip-hop. After their murders, fans were quick to coronate both Tupac and Nipsey as such. Part of what makes both artists legendary is that their tremendous impacts were felt and celebrated while they both were here. Tupac was a revolutionary figure, unafraid to speak truth to power. He was the moral conscience of hip-hop and Black culture during his generation. His booming voice still reverberates in the minds and souls of those seeking change across the globe. Nipsey's eclectic vision merged street culture with shrewd, compassionate capitalism and renewed hip-hop's foundational spirit of making something out of nothing. Nipsey's maturation seemingly happened in front of hip-hop audiences' eyes. Prior to his death, his business accomplishments were touted with the same spotlight as his musical endeavors. In a short time span, Neighborhood Nip morphed into a philanthropist and a community activist while simultaneously releasing music. While both artists were taken from us too soon, it is undeniable that their legacies will live on forever.